Well, one of you might have warned me that I needed to take out that bracket so that I could put this cocking lever for the shutter back in here. However, I figured it out for myself. We'll get this back in place. See if I can get that spring to sit around where that's better out of the way. I'll get this back where it came from. So, for the interest of knowing how things can be taken apart, this support for the focus rail here needs to be removed so that you can get this lever in and out of the camera. If that support's removed, then everything goes fairly smoothly. See if I can get this round in position. Okay, it's like that, is it? Alright. A large shoulder screw that cocking arm pivots on. Get my bracket back in place. I think I've got my focus popped out of place here now, have I? Yeah, looks right. Why does that not want to go in place? Did I shift that wedge? That's a mystery. Back that wedge right back. Oh, that spring might be holding me up. That's better. Get that in there. Of course, I've got to get that adjustment right again now. That looks good. And I'll just put a bit of lube around that shoulder screw. Tighten that screw up. Now see if I can get its return spring in place. Yes. Okay, that part's done. The focus is still good, and that'll do for the moment. I'm not sure what parts need to go in next, but doubtless I'll be able to figure that out. Well, the weekend has come and gone, and I've got to put these components back on here now. Now this piece sat on there like that. It was retained with this eccentric screw, and I made note of where that went by marking a line across here, little scratch, and I've also got a photo that I took when I was taking the camera apart to show me where that sat. And the photo is here. So I can see exactly where that alignment needs to be, assuming that that's still the correct adjustment between that tiny mark I've made there and the edge of the lever. Yeah, so that should be fine. So that's that piece in place. I'll apply a bit of lubricant, synthetic grease to that pin and that surface. And that's that little piece of the puzzle sorted out and back together. And now I've got to move on to the next piece. Well, the next piece I've got to put back is this piece, which has conveniently fallen to little pieces right in front of me, and so I will have to put that back together. It needs to be cleaned anyway, but we'll see how we get on. Now I notice that there's a spring in here, and almost certainly it's pushing up on some small pin or other. Interesting. Well, if I'm going to take this apart, I'll need to be somewhat careful about it. I don't think I need to strip all this apart. I would like to have this out because it's got a lot of broad surfaces and almost certainly there'll be sticky grease under there. These other pieces I can simply clean down with solvent and be pretty confident that I'll get rid of all the filth. So this piece with its spring in here, that's a very strong little spring. It extends into that socket by the looks of it, and it's providing some resistance against that. This is not symmetrical, so if I take this thing apart, I've got to make sure I put it all back together again in the right place. This is just little ratchet pawls here, and one of them has simply slipped out of position here. would normally sit opposite there, and this spring would lift up and hook in behind there like that. Oops, that's just about off its post there. Let's pop that down into place. That's better. That's how that little piece would go. So I'll just pop those to one side. They're fairly straightforward. Not looking for any problems there. But this piece, that will certainly push out, and certainly that spring is holding something in position. Alright, well, I think I'll remove those 3 screws, and I want to have a look at that spring and see if I can see what it's holding, because it might be very difficult to get it back in place. This is all quite sticky with old grease, which is why I'm keen to have it all apart. Get that stickiness away. Make sure I know where everything is. That cutout there is on that side. I'll just make a little mark there so I know. I know which way this goes because I can see where that arm hooks into it. And obviously it can only go together in one of 3 places. It's got 3 holes there. They may not even be equidistant with each other, but they probably are. See if this will lift off. Now I can see a pin through here. No, that plate's not lifting off. The whole lot's coming out. Well, I suspect that there's a pin, a sprung-loaded pin or a sprung-loaded ball or something in here providing some friction, some controlled friction. So I'm going to push that apart inside a plastic bag. I do not want pieces flying all over the room. Alright, let's see what happens. Okay, so I've pushed that out. Yes, we had a spring, strong spring, and it's got one of those nylon plungers on the end of it, and that was providing the controlled friction. That runs all the way through here. I think that this plug at the other end is solid, is it? No, it's another one. So there's one of these pieces at each end. One of these nylon plugs at each end. Okay, that answers that question. And this piece, well, there's no moving parts there. I can put those 3 screws back in there. There's no reason for me to take that apart. Nothing to be gained. That screwdriver's not helping me. I think the tip's too broad. Oh, it certainly looks like my finer one. Okay, let's just try a different screwdriver. I don't seem to be able to get it to engage with the screw head very well. Yeah, finer one's certainly doing the job for me. Yeah, it's the slot and the screw, the the edges of the slot are slightly pushed up, so that when you're trying to get your screwdriver engaged with the slot, they're not slipping in nicely. Okay, so these parts, I just want to clean these now with some naphtha and get rid of all traces of this sticky grease. Make sure that these levers in particular are all moving freely, that everything just drops into place as you'd expect it to. And then I can put all this together, I suppose. Alright, let's clean these parts. Everything is quite sticky. Just washing the grease out from underneath that arm there. It's looking a bit better. And all this is just the tedious stuff, cleaning. But it's got to be done. Grease is particularly good at gathering dust over time. Dust will settle onto any surface, but where the surface has got grease on it, it tends to stick and stay around. Well, of course, if it stays around and accumulates, eventually, instead of having nice slippery lubricating grease, you have a grinding compound made up of dust and grit suspended in an oily medium, which is great if you're wanting to grind valves, but it's not marvellous when you're wanting to lubricate your camera. Okay. I'm going to flood clean this and blow that away with a blower, so that as I'm blowing away the solvent, it will also blow out any contaminants or oils that the solvent has dissolved. And if you don't blow it away, the solvent will evaporate and leave the oils exactly where they were. So what I'm doing is making sure that that naphtha is worked in there, that all the levers have been moved and the naphtha's got behind everything. And blow that solvent away, and as you can see, it carries with it the oil and grease that it's picked up. So this is now clean and dry, and I can lubricate it appropriately as I decide is fit. That all seems to work nicely. Okay, well I think I'll call that piece clean, and I'll just finish up this thing in the same way with a bit of naphtha, run down behind there and then blow that solvent away. And clean these other components that I've got here. Make note of which way these pieces go. Unhook the spring. Be careful not to lose these springs. Yeah, they look like they're trapped fairly well. If I put this, well, it's probably hard to put this back together, back to front, but you never know your luck in a big city, so I've got to be careful not to do that. Now with those springs present, I've got to be fairly cautious about swabbing this, because I don't want to catch the cotton bud on one of those springs, flip it off and sending it flying away to the dim recesses of the corners of the room where I'll never find it again. And the gear here, I'm just going to run some naphtha around the outside edge of that. It looks pretty clean. I'm blowing that away. I'm looking into the roots of the teeth. I'm looking to see if there's any impact of dirt or filth. But that looks fine. And the two ratchet pulls, I'll just swab those clean. Call that piece clean. It's a bit grimy. If I was more familiar with the camera and I knew exactly where every piece fitted, I would probably gather up all the pieces like this and stick them in the ultrasonic cleaner and clean them all in one go. But I'm not that familiar with the camera, and so I much prefer to clean the pieces individually and in their groups, so that I know where all the pieces go. Of course, a lot of these pieces will probably just fall apart now because they previously were stuck together with grease. And I'm busy getting rid of that. So this camera is an automat from 1951, I believe, 1951 to 54 or something of that nature, and there doesn't seem to be a great deal of service information available, or certainly none that I could easily lay my hands on. How much of this I need to put back in here before I put that together? Oh, all of it probably. That piece in particular, I've got to get its spring and so forth back in place. Get that piece back in there. That's on the inside, and all the other pieces are on the outside, so I can put them on later. Okay, well, I've got those pieces all clean, so I can lubricate this, get these pieces back together. The other pieces go on the outside, I think, so they can probably stay. Yes, the other pieces go on the outside, so I can put them on after I get this side plate back on the camera. There's a tiny scratch next to that screw hole there. It looks almost could be a number or something on there. I don't know. I don't think I did that. Now I've lubricated these various levers here with a little bit of graphite powder, because I've got a lot of fairly broad flat surfaces here rubbing against each other, and if you use grease or something of that nature, and there's always a danger it will get sticky at a later date. So I've just rubbed a bit of graphite powder in there and checked that everything seems to move very freely. You can see where there are rub marks here and here. That's where there would have been potentially a high friction area, and I've just made sure I've worked graphite powder into those areas. You could use molybdenum paste. Graphite powder has possibly the advantage there that it's less likely to cause problems long term. The molybdenum paste, although the name suggests that it's dry molybdenum paste, of course it's got some sort of binder, and I'd rather not have that on broad flat surfaces where there's minimal amounts of spring tension to bring things back to the rest positions. You're better to have something dry in that position, I think. Right, well that part's good. I've got to get this piece in there. And there's another nuisance that I've since discovered that I've got to deal with. So, I want to lubricate the inside of this bush quite well. Just run some grease through there. I've got the spring and the little tensioning pieces, see if I can get them poking through the holes. Yeah, there they are. Now I've just got to get this in here. And how I go about getting those two things back in their sockets, I'm not entirely sure. I'll just try pushing. I've got one side just in and no more, and I'll see if I can get the other side to go in. Doesn't want to line up. Perhaps if I lead with that one. Try that. That's it. It's in. Okay. Well, it certainly has the desired effect. Very controlled, the friction there. Okay, so about getting all this together. This is fun. I've had a brief look at this, and this looks like it's going to be entertaining to get back together. What have I got to achieve? This plate at this point needs to tuck down into a slot in the body here. There's a groove in the body at this point, and under here that the plate hooks under the body at that point, and this arm has to go underneath that projection there. That sounds doable, but this arm here has to hook over the projection on this lever here, that stud. So can all this be done at once? Well, probably. I'm sure somebody's done it before. So if they can do it, presumably I can do it as well. It's knowing where to lead from and to, I expect. We'll get that over there first. Well, that's fun. Okay, so that's over there. I've got to get the other pieces led into the various slots. That's sitting in the right place. Now the post on there is not falling into the right position. I think that needs to be down. Does it go in there? It does, okay. That goes in there. That goes in there. That goes under there. That's all sitting down in place, which is probably as it should be. Let's get these screws in place. So I had 2 screws, one there, one here I believe. Where does that piece couple to? We'll find out shortly. I've got a fair idea. Okay, so there's 1 screw there, 1 screw there, and at this point that was held down. There was a gear and a screw that sat on there. The gear sat on that post, the screw was the bracket that held that gear down. I think that's correct. Okay, so I'll reassemble this stuff and put that back on there. That's our film advanced stuff.